The test review for Math 1101. This is the lecture for Tuesday, September 29, and hopefully we'll go through some important questions for you. Still haven't finalized the test, still working on a few things I'll comment on at the end of the discussion today. I'll also have some work with Excel, primarily for your web-assigned homework. I know how exacting it is. You only get 5 attempts. Of course, I've relaxed the due date till December, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be starting on it, because we'll be assuming that you can work with Excel on the test. But since Excel is not used, then as we did on the lectures, you'll have to, of course, try to show your work and show the decimal places and all that kind of thing. We'll discuss how that would be submitted later. But let's take a look at the 6 sections that we cover, in addition to having at least a couple of Excel general type problems without actually using Excel. We figure you can do a few easy things with Excel that we'll probably cover today here. Anyway, chapter 1.5 is how we started this, and I've got the ebook kind of dialed in and wanted to kind of go through a few things here. And we did cover all this already, and this is only a minor point of the class. I figure I'll go for a little bit of chapter 1.5, a little bit of 3.2, but the bulk of it will be chapter 4, where the tough stuff is. And of course, we'll also have some Excel questions as well. And we've got some nice pictures and all. We'll talk about the different ways of using scientific notation and dividing it out. And of course, using a regular handheld calculator, non-graphing style. And we can deal with the very large, very small numbers, and they show you how that could be done. A few examples we didn't really cover. Oh, this is interesting. The government announced that to reduce the budget deficit, it will simply move the decimal 2 points to the left. That'd be nice. Well, that's not going to happen. They show you some calculations that you should be looking at yourself. We figure you've read this stuff already. I'm just kind of hitting some of the highlights. A couple of cartoons there. Estimates are always good. You should be able to get in the ballpark, hopefully without a calculator, or at least heavily rounded, so you get at least close. The 500 is comparatively close to 548, but it isn't 5,000 or 50,000 either. So close is what we mean by estimating a kind of a heavily rounded number, which is often gotten without a calculator, by the way. But here's one that we did cover already. It might be the same example. They had the gas near the Canadian border and different prices and different systems. Canadian dollars are different, liters are different versus gallons. So they had a couple of calculations. We did talk about that. So you can go through the example in the book. I believe it's either the same or close to the same. Here we have area versus volume. And remember, you have to multiply and square it out for square feet. So 3 feet to a yard means 9 square feet to a square yard. And then when you get to a cubic yard, it's 3 times 3 times 3, 27 cubic feet. So the cubics get much bigger, much faster. And then they have about the units and all. So look at the examples we covered before. So this is basically just a review of what we already covered, since some of the examples are either the same as the book or very close to the book. Obviously, we have lots of homework problems too that you can work on. And so you could look at that. And I think all the odd numbers are in the back of the book, and you could look at those. I used to assign a lot of those for written homework. We've kind of gotten away from that recently. Doesn't mean you can't do a few, but pick only the ones that look familiar. I wouldn't do some that look too difficult. Okay, so now it looks like I'm going to have to get into this kind of a thing. So let me close up chapter 1, go back there and go over open chapter 3. We'll take a quick look at that. I have a little trouble getting into 3. I don't know why. It won't let me into 3. Yeah, so I might not be able to show you that, but they did talk about growth rates, the linear versus the exponential, and consult the classes. And people have asked me about the cloud. Yeah, I've got hundreds of videos that I'd have to sort through. Haven't found the time to do that. I hope to do that sometime soon, but what they told me was I shouldn't start recording until the class starts. I've had it set in record mode, and anybody who shows up early basically turns on the recording, and then turns off and turns back on, turns back on. So I have to sort through all of them, and some of them are double length, and they couldn't even explain that one. So the cloud recordings right now are just unavailable. I've got too many emails to sort through. It's a nightmare. But starting soon, Live lectures will be available on the cloud, and if I just have one email to look for, even for both my classes, that would be the easiest way to go. That's the way it's supposed to work. I just couldn't figure out what was going wrong with that. Well, anyway, it looks like these are not going to pop up. And 3 doesn't have a link, so 4 does. But 3 did talk about the difference between exponential and logarithmic. So take a look at some of those problems found in the slideshow or in the book. And, you know, the ones that I covered were basically big highlights of the class. And so, you know, I'll try to keep them a little on the light side, but I don't want to skip chapter 3.2 either. So 1.5 and 3.2 will have a minimal amount of coverage. I have to wait for this to kind of load, and we'll kind of hit some of the highlights of chapter 4, 4.1 to 4.4. Sorry about the delay here, but it is going slowly. So let's see if I click on these. Sometimes it wakes it up. Nope. It has to load. So it does give me the original color slide, so I can look at that for a moment until they finally, I didn't realize it would take this long. Here we go. Okay, now this is stuff we assume you've already read, but if you haven't, I'll skim through it really fast, and you don't have much time before the test. Test will be Thursday morning, and it'll start on time. It'll be an hour and 15 minutes. It'll cut off right at hour 15. Don't believe the test will take that long for most of you. But you know, be here a couple minutes early. Yeah, I guess I have to record it. And yes, of course, I have to see you. If I can't see you, I'll be screaming at you in the chat box, as I don't really want to make an announcement to everybody. It should be an audio-free type exam. I'll be looking at you, but you may as well mute your mics because nobody's listening to anything. It'll just be no audio, but all video. Stay away from light sources so I can see your face. If you've got the sun shining behind you and all I see is a silhouette, that just doesn't count. So try to position your camera so I can actually see your face, that is your mouth, your eyes, etc. And so without it, I'll also be screaming at you too, but that isn't quite as bad as not being able to see you. But personal finance, the heaviest part of this class, in my opinion, has lots and lots of examples. And Excel can kind of get you into that, but here we are just going through the ebook here, which I didn't do before, but here we have basically the summary of chapter 3.2, where you had the linear function, which just isn't really done. That's the simplest of all examples, but the curve, once it starts to kick in, it starts to really go up very steeply, but you have to let it do that. And that could be several years, usually too many years for many people's taste, but it doesn't stop the exponential curve from paying off. And they go through lots of examples like this. And yeah, I'm going to try to pick at least 1 or 2 problems from every section in chapter 4. 4.5 is not covered, in case anybody's reading ahead. 4.5, we used to cover that. It's kind of short, kind of easy, but they said not to worry about it. So anyway, just kind of hitting some of the highlights. And here they have some of the stuff that we covered on the slides. Here we have the balance. At the end of year 50 for simple interest, for example, with this $1,000 for principal and 10%, we covered this already. The simple interest would only have you have a balance of $6,000 after 50 years. Oh, look at compounding. Now, to be sure, the annual rate is 10%. That's a pretty decent rate, especially nowadays. But look at the gap, 117,000. Wow, that is a lot compared to 6. So even with only 5% or 4%, it would be still quite a bit of difference. And depending on the interest rate, this would curve at a sharper rate over a period of time. This is only 15 years instead of 50, as you can see. So just kind of reviewing things. And the calculations will be somewhat more important. I don't think we have to worry about this too much, but it is more of a stair-step thing that's approximated by a curve. So that's actually more accurate because every month is when they change the ballots. It could be thought of as being continuous, but there are slight differences there, which you don't have to worry about. Yeah, we want to get R all the time. Period interest rate is R, and R is very important. I would do that in advance just about every step of the way, and I will try to give you numbers that don't involve round-off error. Although with Excel, it would not matter. With Excel, it would be easier, but Excel has not been allowed on this test so far. I don't believe it's going to be. So you basically find R already. I'd go for the easier formulas involving R and T, but you do have the harder formulas, APR over N, N times Y. We suggest you write your own formula sheet. I do have one, but I haven't been able to scan it yet. So give your own formula sheet. If I'm able to make one available in Blackboard, you could also use that, just in case there's something missing. But if you write your own formula sheet, that would be good. So it's sort of an open note test with formulas. So that's how I would go about it, but the rest of it is not open. So they go through a few examples like that, and certainly I will not be skipping 4.1. 4.1, the title, of course, was the balance as you save. The odd numbers are the ones that you get the money, and the even numbers, 4.2, 4.4, are the ones that you're paying out the money, either for credit cards or for other things. Here we compare different types of compounding periods. Yes, we did that in the slideshow. I suppose we could go for something like that, but I will be avoiding daily calculations. They're just too tedious when you're doing it by hand. This one has a very large exponent. I would use all the decimals you can on that. Otherwise, you're liable to make mistakes. Yeah, normally we talk about beyond 10 years. This might not be 10 years, it's only 5 years. Look at the many days. But since I'm not going to give you daily on the situation for the test, that will not be a problem for you. So here's period rate, APR over ends. In fact, the summaries are really good. I do not care for APY. I will not be doing APY. They have future value, present value. That's basically just the same thing as before, just they put different words on it, just a little bit fancier. Doubling time we could do, that's one of those things that we had two different ways. The rule of 72, which is the approximation, which is generally pretty easy. A lot of the time you can just do that in your head. But yeah, APR will be 15% or less. Yeah, that's very likely. And we also have the exact doubling time involving log of 2, a constant number, about 0.3 as I remember, and then 1 plus r. Type all that in. Show some steps. That way I can see what you might have done wrong, and we'll decide whether you can submit that on an email via PDF or just type that into Blackboard. Some people are really good at typing into Blackboard. It's similar to Excel, and I'd almost rather you just type it into Blackboard for the show your work kind of a thing. But I suppose we'll figure out, I'll make the announcement later about that. As of this recording, I haven't actually decided. I just hate looking at hundreds of emails. It's just not very good. It takes forever to do that. So, well, we'll figure that out later. Meanwhile, let's get back to the review here. And that's pretty much 4.1, some of the highlights there. I'm just kind of skimming through here. Oh yeah, here we had an interesting cartoon. I like this one. I actually showed this in class before. How to make $1 million. Well, here's the nature of the seminar. You can't be sure it's a scam unless you know the details. And so they talk about a bunch of stuff. And so the guy comes along and says, invest $100 at 5% interest and wait 190 years. Yeah, it actually works. I checked it out. You only have to wait 190 years, no problem. And you'll get $1 million. Of course, you have to think about inflation. That's something they don't really talk about. Yeah, you can make all this extra money. Well, how's inflation cut into it? That's another story. Borrowing, how much car can you afford? Very important one. Yeah, 1 or 2 questions here for sure. I'm looking at, I don't know, approximately a dozen questions, but I hate to cast that in stone. What if I do 13? What if I do 11? So I'm not going to promise you that, but roughly a dozen questions sound adequate to me. And yes, we have monthly payments, and all these formulas can be written down. I would go for the R formulas, and these could be rounded to 5 or 6 decimal places. As long as I see a good faith effort, I'm willing to accept some round off error that WebAssign just doesn't do, because they assume you're using Excel every step of the way, and yet they never approved that for the tests. So if they change that, I will let you know. But for now, Excel is not directly on the test. We can still ask Excel questions. So anyway, they go through some examples. Some of this showed up on the slides. The recorded lectures you can look up again and just check them out. I'll be using the announcements feature on WebAssign now that I finally figured that out. But they show you some examples here, and I'll show you some Excel examples as well, where you can type that in. And Excel, when you're doing your homework, which you've got till December to finish, then you can show it on Excel, and maybe we'll get a little bit more into Excel later on in the last couple of tests, but for now we won't have too much on that. I avoid these formulas completely. I do not like them. You should calculate R in advance. You should calculate T in advance, and you should show some work as well, especially if it's difficult. But you know, some of the R's are pretty standard, like 6%. We see that a lot. I'm pretty sure you're going to see 6% on the test. That's just 0.005. T in terms of months, just multiply by 12. So maybe not too much work has to be shown. So this one, of course, does not go unevenly. So in Excel, you would have to type in 0.05 divided by 12 and use lots of parentheses. And then you wouldn't actually see what R is directly, but you'd be rebounding it all over the place. I will avoid calculations like that on this upcoming test, however. Okay, so they have several examples, just kind of hitting some of the highlights, looking through the ebook that you should, of course, have a chance to look at. I have to go to the student view to find it. They don't seem to have it in the instructor view. And so look at these highlighted examples. They seem to be the best, especially the ones I covered on the lectures. Now, one argument against the cloud is that you're supposed to be here for all the lectures. But one argument for the cloud is, well, if you want to watch them again. So yeah, so that's something that if I just had my act together, I would have had the recording start at the beginning of each lecture and I would have had it together. But didn't know that, so apologize for that. But we'll try to, if I can't get some of them out for you before this test, then certainly by the second test we'll have all the cloud recordings that I can find available. And unfortunately, if I gave you the entire list, you'd have about a 10% chance of getting them. So that could be quite frustrating to you as well. So I was hoping to check them out before that. Anyway, they go through these little tables. You might see a table type of situation for payments and all that, but we'll see. If it's too difficult, I probably won't go in that direction. This is more what I had in mind, where you have a payment, and they show how it applies to interest, applies to balance owed and outstanding balance, and we did do that. Half of them are available in the recorded lectures, so you can do that. This is equity built, as you build up the equity that you actually own, but this is the part where you're paying down the interest. At first, in this type of loan here, which I haven't looked at the details on, you're paying 45% interest. Sometimes it's even higher. It could be like 75% interest. By the time you get to 120 payments, which is 10 years, then you're down to paying the entire thing off, and it's 0% the last payment. Home mortgages, well, they show some graphs here, 30-rate fixed mortgages. We're down to historic lows. We're down way low now, down to this solid line. So that's kind of good news. Here's a typical mortgage statement we didn't have a chance to show you, and you can certainly enjoy that. I love the account number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they don't show how the calculations are done, but they do show you how much you paid to principal and how much you paid to interest. Oh, wow, look at that, almost 3-to-1 ratio there. Not very good. This must be early in the game. So that's not fun to think about. Well, anyway, they show some more stuff and some examples. They calculate R with a 9% interest rate, 30 years, 360 months. So this one I could probably show you on Excel. This is actually the one I will show you on Excel. I've already got that one worked out on the other page. In fact, while we're here, why don't I just go over to the Excel right now? I think I could just do that really fast. Let's see, just click on the Excel box and it should be right there. Yeah, okay, so this is what we have for that particular example. Maybe I can move this down so you can kind of compare them side by side. Well, sort of. Yeah, 300,000 is what's borrowed. So in the formula, very, very fine print, I can't seem to expand this very well. That's the amount borrowed, 300,000. R was 9% divided by 12, 0.75% per month, 0.0075. Notice how that's written right here. I have put parentheses around to contain the numerator, though. You must do that. You have to use the asterisk every time you multiply. There's the R. This is 1 plus R. Notice how easy it is to add 1. Just stick a 1 in there. But then 1 plus R gets raised to the T, which for 30 years, very typical mortgage, most of them are 360 months. So raise that to the 360 power. That's where the round-off error would come in if you're doing it on calculator. But on a calculator, would not be concerned about that. This is for the homework, not for the test, by the way. Excel is not available on the test. So anyway, in the denominator, which gets divided and then parentheses, make sure we have to use parentheses here. And sometimes in math you don't have to, but here we do. So once again, that same number gets raised to 360. Excel will do that for you. You'll be seeing that number basically twice in a row, but you do subtract 1 down below. So we did see those like 9 decimal places stay the same, and you just lose 1 from the numerator down to the denominator. Well, anyway, we got $2,413 approximately there, and that's what we got here. It didn't round to 2 decimals, it rounded to several, but as you answer the problem, you will always round money problems to 2 decimals. That is just a standard situation. No exceptions to that. It should be rounded correctly. If you give me 86 cents, that's not completely right. You'll only get partial credit. Yes, we do take that kind of rounding seriously, and so will WebAssign, by the way. Some people think, oh, I just truncate. Nope, you don't just truncate, you round, and that's important. And I'm always surprised how people don't pay attention to that, but that's bizarre to me. It's so easy to round, but some people don't think it's easy, so practice it if you haven't done it in a while. Here's another example done in Excel, and you can do that if you want and get an exact answer on the calculator. You may be off by as much as a nickel. We worked out one in the lecture that was off by 5 cents, doing the best we could do. That will not be an issue on the exam, however, as long as you can show your work somehow or another. Typing it in the box there on the blackboard will be fine, or perhaps submitting a PDF would also be fine. But I run into issues also. PDF is by far the best way to do it. If you're picking some other method, I may not be able to read it, so that is not a good thing. I would first of all say try to type it into Blackboard. You should have room. It'd be like a short answer situation where you have a room for a step or two, just like they've shown in the book, just exactly kind of like this, except you might want to show me the decimals too. And that way I can spot any errors that you may have made. And parentheses are by far the most important or common errors that we see. So please go ahead and write them out. I tried to do that on the lectures, so I hope that that was helpful to you because that's why the test basically has to be done right now. And if you don't give me the data in between, like, well, these two are easy, but the others are not, that's I'd like to see that so I can see if you're on track to getting it right, or maybe your round off is just pretty close enough, or maybe I just lose 1 point out of 10 or something like that. So I'll figure that out as you show me your work. If you don't show me any work, then I'm going to have to assume the worst. And that's never a very good thing. Anyway, they talk about adjustable rate. We're not going to cover adjustable rate mortgages. It's just too difficult. In fact, honestly, it involves calculus to do it right. But they did have a comparative thing. Let's move on. Let's get to 4.3. And as you've by now already read this stuff, I'm sure, building the nest egg, this is where savings come in. And they talk about various things I used to talk about in class. Didn't do that this time. Anyway, so I move along here. They show you a table about somebody putting $100 in and getting the interest on interest, and it gradually slides up a little bit more each time. And you see the interest is now not just $1, but $9.37, and not just $9 either. You got a little bit of interest on interest there. Okay, that's interesting. Principal times 1 plus r to the t power. Very important formula. That one you'll definitely be seeing. And sort of different versions of that. The balance after t monthly deposits. You put in the deposit too, and then they have this little correction factor here. There's the long-winded formula. I do not recommend that one. But if you'd like it better somehow, yeah, you can put that on your note sheet. But do R and T in advance, I would have to suggest. I will avoid these types of numbers on the test because they involve too much rounding, and I will give you friendly numbers, 6%, 9%, 12%, things like that, that do at least round. Don't have to do rounding. You can put them out to 4 decimals or whatever it might be, and it's exact, so you don't have to worry about that. And they've got others. What's the needed monthly deposits for a goal? We just redesign the formulas. It's the same formula, just put it the other way. In fact, I've seen some people use the other formula and they just solve for the other variable. Fine, I don't care. Just show your work is the main thing. This is where a PDF of handwritten work would be helpful. I'm still working on that, so I'll have an announcement later on in Blackboard, or perhaps an email about the exact format, how we'll have this. In my other class, we're not really getting handwritten work at all. And sometimes it suits it perfectly, and other times I can't read. The people have sent too dark or too light a copy, and I cannot read it, or it's blurry, or it's a page missing, and 3 pages are duplicated. All kinds of stuff that takes days and days for me to go through. I'm not looking forward to it. So once again, please try to show your work on Blackboard as much as you can. And if you need to supplement it, well, okay, we will probably let you do that via email. And PDF, please. Anything else, don't expect it to work. If you're not giving me PDF, don't expect it to work. I do have a couple of others that might work, but Google Docs, etc., I will not be able to do that. So just telling you right now, once the test is done, I'll give you a little bit of time, but then you're done. And then you can't just send it in 3 days later and expect me to give you credit for it. That's not going to work. So here we have a 40-year loan. Boy, these really go further along. This is a 40-year situation, and this is a savings deposit needed for retirement. This gets a little bit more esoteric. I don't emphasize this part quite as much as the credit cards and the monthly payments for the mortgages. But yeah, I will have to do something about yield. This looks like a pretty good one. So you pretty much put in the nest egg that you already own, and you get your yield. You kind of pay yourself, but pay yourself with interest, and that way you don't go broke. You don't go to Vegas and drop it all in one weekend or something like that. So, I have a few formulas like that. Once again, nest egg needed, yield goal, those are good formulas. Forget those formulas. I hope you don't like them. They're just way too tedious. And once again, a .05, too difficult to do on a test. I'm not going to have you worry about that unless Excel somehow gets approved, which so far it hasn't been. Okay, let's take a quick look at 4.4. Then I'll go into a little bit of Excel work. And this one's a real important one. So almost everybody seems to have a credit card at one time or another. Here's a credit card statement. And they would like you to pay the minimum payment. That way they don't have to get mad at you, and yet they collect maximum money, almost like a mini mortgage. like a 20-year mortgage is the way it usually works out, and that's not to your favor. And most credit card interest rates are pretty high. Oh, 29.99. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Well, that's the pure profit for the banks. You really want to avoid that. Uh, so unless you work for a bank, then you're on the receiving end. That's, I guess, a different story, but who gets to do that? Not too many of us. So anyway, they go through these tables. There may be a table at some point, but we do have the tables you could look at. Minimum payments is not suggested, but we could have a problem that tells you what would happen with that. Here's one that, well, we could also give you a step-by-step problem where you have a previous balance and you make a payment, you make a purchase, and we could step you through a problem like that too. Here's how you pay off the credit card. It does have the kind of the decreasing exponential function, and yeah, those could get very tedious. I'm going to try to minimize that as much as we can. Yeah, here's one that I had in mind though. We have an interest rate, R, which is like normal, but M is the minimum payment, which always has to be bigger than R, or you won't be able to pay anything off. It'll just get worse and worse and worse, and that's called usury. It's illegal. So yeah, you want to make sure that works out. And this one worked out to be, what, 1.02 with the 1 plus R, and then 1 minus 0.05 is 0.95. That multiplied out to almost 0.97. So yes, the balance is shrinking. It takes a long time to do that. And after 60 months, the 10,000 has gotten down to 1,500, but it's still up there. And yeah, then we could even break out the logs. I'm not sure I will, but the logs could be used here to find out when it hits a certain level, such as whatever the number was. I think it could be down to $100, if I remember right. This is one we actually did in class. Yeah, down to 100. So you just set the 100 down and find out how many months it is by using logs. This one's a little bit tougher than the other one. No exponential functions at all in this class. This is a possible log question, perhaps. And then here we have the review of something from another section, not borrowed and all. And so complications of credit card usage. There's a lot of good consumer tips that I don't think we're going to have room for on a test, but they're still very, very important to read, so we hope you do that. Let me get over to Excel again. And well, actually, let me get back to the Excel portion of the reading. This is something that if you bought your book through some other source but the bookstore, let me get back to this. I'm not sure why it's taken so long. You would not have it. Okay, maybe I have to go through the other route. And okay, let's go back here. Nope. Okay, I'm getting it. Okay, finally. So I can get back to, well, let's just go through this route here. Okay, there we go. Book resources. That's where the extras are, especially the spreadsheet basics. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but inside the custom edition, which everybody should have, so you can get into WebAssign and find the stuff about Excel, we do have lots of extra reading. It's almost like another chapter, but I've decided to incorporate it into the homework right now and not really do it directly. But yes, you should be able to do basic calculations on Excel. So if you haven't read this yet, you should actually read it, because the best use of Excel is in chapter 4. A little bit of use in the other ones, but not quite so much. Just simple math in those other ones. So what do spreadsheets do? And so they have some of the basics here. They allow you to enter, display, compute with data and tables. And they show the cheese example that I think we did cover. They put in a certain amount per pound, so 1 pound is $4.95, and then you double both sides. But they've already typed that in. They didn't show you what they did. They just showed you the results of it. And some little more difficult calculations. You don't need a calculator. You can just type in all your customers and then find out what their cost was and see how that goes. In fact, here's how the formula would go. They found the cell A2, which had a 1 in it, and they multiplied by $4.95. And they had a way of clicking and dragging to do a kind of a fill that does the formulas all together. That type of question will not be on the test, but simple questions like this kind of thing, how would you multiply in Excel to get to, pounds of cheese from the pounds to the cost is what I'm trying to say. So we could ask something like that perhaps. That's all. We're not going to ask you anything deep. So they talk about other options. We hope you have a laptop. I hope you're not doing this on a phone. Tablet's probably okay, but a phone, there's all kinds of disadvantages to that, so I hope you're not doing it. But they do have a little bit of help for you on that, and same with the videos as well. But anyway, entering data, this is what we showed you before. You type in the number like 345 and it'll show you up here. And that was just a number. You didn't need an equal sign for that. I guess it wouldn't hurt, but it's just a plain old constant number. They're not going to worry about that. And here's something for a tablet, so I'll let you look at that yourself. I'm not going to cover that now. And you know, copying and paste, rearranging data. They have a few things here. On the Mac, I've been using Control-C and Control-V quite a lot for keyboard shortcuts, but depends on what you have. You'll learn whatever your copy and paste would be. And here's something about rounding too. I haven't fully explored this, but here if you want a 3 decimal places, you just keep clicking until you get what you need. And if you need a whole bunch of extra decimal places, it has that as well, although a bunch of those are 0, but still it has a lot of accuracy there if you somehow wanted it. Of course, it'll have this in its memory, but it'll only output this amount. So if you needed it to the nearest penny, Excel could be very helpful that way. But you should be able to round yourself. Of course, it'll go into scientific notation for very large numbers, such as 3.2 e plus 15. That means start with 3.2, then multiply by 10 to the 15th power. That is a huge number. 10 to the 9th is a billion. 10 to the 12th is a trillion. I believe this is a quadrillion, but that's neither here nor there. Small numbers, such as this number here, like the width of an atom or something like that, could be very small. They use the negative number here, e minus 13. It's 10 to the minus 13th. So you'd move the decimal to the left 13 places. And if you want to count the decimals there, you can until you get to the 7. Then that's where you would stop. But that's not fun at all. And they go through some other stuff that maybe we haven't covered, dates and times, negative numbers, just put the minus sign, just like the hyphen. We haven't been using many negative numbers. You can hit the undo button to make if you made a mistake. That's kind of helpful. You should save your work. If you're interested in keeping it, you try to save it. That part I haven't gotten into too much. I haven't been saving my work at all. Formulas, yes, formulas can be very helpful, and we've been using them. This is the type of question we could also ask you on the exam, such as how do you add 2 plus 4? Simply equals 2 plus 4. That's all. Pretty easy question, huh? If you haven't even seen Excel, that could be an issue. And here's an exponent. We're not going to probably ask you for a mortgage payment on the Excel. That does seem to be a little bit excessive, but we could ask you any one of these, for example, that we did talk about. And they show you various things. And here's a formula here. They took cell B3, it had 25 in it, and multiplied by 5, and got the money from the kids. Apparently the kids were $5, and the adults would be the same thing, except it'd be equals C3 for the 26 adults, and they'd be multiplied by 8, so asterisk 8. So equals C3, asterisk 8 would go into this cell. Once you hit return, the money amount shows up. So that's the beauty of Excel, is you don't have to type in stuff over and over again, assuming you get your copy and drag for the fill to work, which I wasn't able to do, at least in that particular mode. So they do have some warnings there. Copying a formula can be done as well, so that's also very, very handy. So all this stuff that you've probably read before, if you've already had Excel, some of this would be very easy for you, of course. And here's the tablet phone instructions. You can look at that if you want. I don't think we're going to need this one, preventing an address from being copied, from changing when copied. Not going to need that, but if you did need it, you could use that. Here's an example with the price per pound, $4.29. So they talk about the absolute cell reference. Here we have a few formulas that we're probably not going to be needing very much. So that's something that we're not going to be using. So troubleshooting, this is interesting. Some people think they can use a calculator all the time with Excel. That defeats the purpose of Excel. You're not supposed to be using a calculator, except perhaps to double check something that you might be suspicious about. If you've already run it on Excel and you're seeing some number that doesn't look right, then I suppose that's an exception. But if you haven't even tried Excel yet, that's not too good. Of course, the program cannot read your mind. It's very literal, extremely literal, so you have to be very careful with that. They have a few other things, too, that you could look at. Failure to read the manual. So often they don't have manuals anymore. They just assume that you can do it by trial and error. Not that I love manuals, but at least you've got some place to look at for instructions, and that part's always been a nice thing for me. So financial math, we can take a quick look at this. I know this could get tedious, but yes, you should always get R done immediately. I don't like dragging that around. Sometimes though in Excel and some of the homework problems, you may see that you have to drag in that 0.07 divided by 12 every step of the way because you don't want to drag in that number. So let it do its calculations, keep parentheses around it. And that could even work if you're using your homework for any even basic one, like 6%. If you don't want to figure that out, you can just put in parentheses 0.06 over 12, close parentheses, and do that instead of this number. But this number is very easy to do. So I would do that on the written part for the test. You should always do it. I'll give you friendly numbers that you should do this because Excel is not available on the test. And if I don't see any work, then I have to assume that you're cheating or used Excel. And so that's why the work has to be shown. So this is why I wanted you to practice that stuff shown on the videos. So please do that. And they go through kind of an example here with 0.5% per month, 6% per year. That's the R number. And they go through and they show how this could be done. They're even using the percent. So apparently not just 0.005, they could just type in 0.5%. That would also work. And they have some commands to add up the two numbers. The B2 plus the C2 gives you the total balance. C2 is where the interest was. And they go through and do it a few more times, and they fill it, and they can do it every step of the way. You don't have to type these formulas in because it kind of shifts it ahead for you, all the way up to the 60-second level for time equals 60. Wow, that's pretty good. They have this version of the formula. We use something else, though, very close to this. This I over N is the same thing as R. That is R right there. N is the number of periods, usually 12, and this is also known as T. We already multiplied the 12, so, 12 times 3 might be 36. So it's a similar formula, but it is done a little bit differently, and they show you how some of the Excel commands can be done in general. I just type the numbers in on my Excel spreadsheet. So that's basically how that could be done. Let's take a look at, this is getting a little bit out there we don't really need. So this is becoming a little bit more involved than I had in mind. So yeah, but they do a future value and present value. If you care to look at that, that could be helpful there. But then it's starting to kind of spin off into other more difficult directions. So that part I'm not going to particularly worry about. But yes, once you get the filling part done, then you can kind of get that going pretty well. I did want to show you some of the graphs here that we could show. And look at the difference in the interest rates. 1% interest rate has your $10,000 grow to, was it 61? Is this months? It's probably months. 2.5 grows more. 6% is growing pretty fast. So that's a pretty sweet difference there. And a scatter plot, basically the same information. I don't think it's quite as good, but it does show you, again, a kind of a clumpy way what's going on here. So once you get your table done, then you can actually plot it and see the differences. This one looks like it's going straight up on a straight line, but it really is. These are all exponential. So that's why I like the curves a little bit better. They kind of show what's going on, but if you needed to see what happened in a particular year, you could kind of pinpoint that a little bit better. So that's how that goes. We're not going to do statistics and probability right now. So I think that's going to about do it. I'll have more information about possible PDFs, but we do recommend that you show your work in Blackboard. Just type it in. There'll be enough room for short answers, and show whatever steps you can. If you feel the need to send me something, be sure it's in PDF format in an email. I don't think I'm going to collect it through Blackboard this time. It's too much work. But expect your test to take longer to grade as well when that happens. I'd rather just do it all inside of Blackboard if I can. So the test will start on time with the class, and it'll end at the 75-minute mark. Don't believe you're going to need 75 minutes, but it will cut you off if you're not done. So fair warning on that one. Be sure I can see your face. That is very important. If you do not respond to my chat, that's a problem. You expect to be cut off and basically get a 0. So that'll be a sad thing. I don't like to do it. I've done it a few times here, and I'm prepared to do it. So I have to emphasize, I have to see your face, or you do not get a test counted. So that's so important. A departmental rule, which I agree with. Well, that's going to do it. So we'll have our tests on Thursday morning, and you should work on your WebAssign. I did extend the deadline. So somebody's calling me. I guess I'll sign off for now. Contact me during the office hour on Wednesday if you need to. Okay, that's all I got. Bye.